This is a psychological thriller narrated full story about the slow erosion of identity. A calm voice in the dark, speaking to a camera that never blinks, recounting a night when sleep would not come and memory came in shards. A writer retreats to a secluded cabin to mend his life, only to discover a manuscript in his own handwriting, an elegant crime story he has no recollection of composing. It is precise, clinical, and disturbingly intimate about a murder that, by all appearances, has already happened. In the hush between midnight and dawn, the cabin holds its breath. Floorboards settle like distant heartbeats. Wind seesaws through the pines. And somewhere within the text, a version of the narrator watches from between the lines, taking notes on his every weakness. If truth is a mirror, this story begins the moment it cracks.
I arrive at the cabin at the frayed end of autumn, when the pines are embalmed in cold and the lake has the sheen of an unblinking eye. I tell myself I have come to heal. Insomnia has hollowed me out. My memory, once supple, now tastes of rust. Names abrade my tongue, days smeared together like ink caught in rain. My doctor called it temporary partial amnesia, as if the softening of a single word, temporary, might prop up a collapsing house. I carry in my boxes and my rigid routines, black coffee, a pharmacist's museum of amber vials, a stack of blank notebooks lined like unmined fields. I sweep the dust from the desk and drag the chair to face the window, so that, in the hours when sleep refuses me, I can stare out at the skeletal trees and their thin wrists scratching the glass. I will write, I promise myself. I will reassemble my mind. On the first night, the house introduces itself in creaks and small knocks. The ceiling fan hums, barely turning. I pile my books, pens, and assurances in neat rows, a shallow dominion against the dark. When the sky is the color of bruised grapes, I draw open the bottom desk drawer and find a manuscript I do not remember placing there. 160 pages, crisp, clipped margins, a title in my handwriting, precise and severe, A Method of Vanishing. The paper smells faintly of smoke and something sap-sweet. I touch the signature on the final page, my name, unmistakable. The side of it is both tender and accusatory. Insomnia has many tricks, but it has not yet taught me how to write in my sleep. The first paragraph is a blade. A man drives into a forest at the hour when the wind forgets its voice. He is a writer who is also a thief. The story he has come to steal is his own. I feel the small hairs on my forearms rise. The cadence is mine. The knife-edge economy, mine. The rhythms are exactly the rhythms my fingers would drum if they remembered how. But then the plot arranges itself like a net. A secluded cabin, a restless lake, a page-bound crime that knows the floor plan of this specific house, the way the third stair groans and the bathroom door sticks in damp weather. The story's victim is not a stranger. He is described with the exact pale half-moon scar under my chin, a relic from childhood. He is a writer unspooled by insomnia. He is afraid of mirrors. I stop reading, press my palm to the glass, and leave a fogged oval. Try to summons a memory of having produced this work. Nothing. My mind is an archive with locked cabinets, every label peeled off. Every object in the cabin turns in that moment to look at me. The fan's slow orbit, the lamp's tarnished neck, the cheap painting of a marina in false sunlight. They gather, conspire, watch. I tell myself there must be a rational explanation. Perhaps I printed this manuscript during the lost weeks after the hospital. Perhaps my agent sent it ahead as a provocation to resume the work. Perhaps the cabin's previous tenant left it here by accident. But none of those fictions explain my handwriting or the small, almost ritualistic note on page 73. Remember to leave the back door unlatched. He always forgets.
I check the back door. The latch is hooked, not unlatched, hooked. Still, as I stand there with my fingers on the cold brass, the shape of a thought opens. He always forgets. The sentence tastes familiar, like a bedtime story with a thorn in it. When the clock cinches toward 2 a.m., the lake shifts in its dark cradle, whispering to the dock. The manuscript waits on the desk, its pages squared as if prepared for a precise operation. My eyes feel full of grit, and the cabin smells faintly of damp pine and something like old breath. My memory moves in slow weather. I sit, turn on the lamp, and read. I read the night down to its stem. The story describes, in surgical detail, a sequence of events staged to look like an accident. How to angle a heavy frame above a doorway, where to place a loose rug, which screws to loosen on a stair baluster so it gives at the right moment. The voice is clinical. The instructions are intimate. There is a recurring motif. The victim wakes to the sensation of being watched, but when he turns, only the window stares back with its black, polished eye. I imagine closing the manuscript, packing my bag and leaving before dawn paints the pines the color of old bones. But the lake has frozen into a single pane of judgment, and the road home seems like a thin thread that might snap. Also, I have nowhere else that makes sense, and there's a morbid tether binding me to the pages. If I wrote them, they might be the only map out of this maze. At 3:30, I reach a chapter called Repairs. The first sentence is underlined 3 times. When you forget what you did, you call it a repair. My mouth goes dry. I hear myself very calmly say into the empty room, I need to sleep. I do not sleep. I listen to the long syllable of the refrigerator, the occasional tap of settling pipes. Somewhere in the walls, a soft patter like fingertips learning a keyboard. At 4, the power blinks. The lamp dims, flutters, steadies. The cabin seems to hold its breath, then exhale through a seam in the window frame. On the desk, a silverfish explores the edge of page 99, tasting the starch, tasting the story. I whispered to no one. If I wrote this, I needed to tell me why. From the lake, something knocks the underside of the dock twice, or the dock knocks itself to feel less alone. I am very awake, and my memory is very far away. Morning arrives the way a lie arrives, thin, persistent, unearned. The forest is a graven image. The sky stays low, colorless, like paper waiting for ink. I make coffee that tastes like scorched pennies and take my pills with it, bargaining with chemistry. The kitchen window shows me a version of my face I do not love. Pallid, unshaven, eyes like dropped marbles. When I blink, for a fraction of a second, I do not recognize the man looking back. It is not a mystical experience. It is a small, ordinary terror. The self as a stranger in a borrowed room. I read again. The manuscript's middle act is a set of rings that narrow around the throat. The narrator, my twin, methodically documents how to train the mind to forget, cataloging rituals to sand down memory's teeth. He describes sleeping in the afternoon instead of the night to starve the day of continuity. He prescribes new names for old rooms. He recommends always keeping one light slightly dimmer than the others so the eyes adjust to uncertainty. I stand in the doorway counting the lamps. 1 in the hall, 1 in the living room, both weak. Had I done this to myself? Set the scene to echo the page? The manuscript insists the victim, me if I believe it, wrote the crime story as a rehearsal, then taught himself not to remember. He calls it an alibi etched in fog.
He says the only thing more durable than truth is a well-fed doubt. Outside, the wind drapes itself across the trees like a wet shawl. A raven argues with an invisible counterpart. Two deer move through the brush, deliberate and secretly panicked. I come to a passage circled in pencil. Memory is not a vault. It is a choir that knows only the loudest singer. If you want a memory to die, do not kill it, drown it in a louder song. I trace the pencil groove. The pressure of the line is my pressure. I can see how my hand would have moved. The rage that wears the face of calm creeps into my palms. The day is made of wool and static. I begin to notice small dissonances. My suitcase is missing the blue sweater I thought I packed. The pantry holds a jar of honey I never buy, too sweet, too sticky. The bathroom mirror has a thumbprint at the same height as my own, a half-moon smear of something I cannot identify, as if someone steadied themselves there, and that someone was me. At noon, a flashback arrives, like weather. No warning, no courtesy. I am at a different table, in a different house, laughing, and the word repair is used like a prayer. The table has a nick shaped like a fishhook. A woman's hand, I cannot see the face, taps the wood and says, "You'll fix it. You always do." The laughter sounds like it belongs to a better person. I lose the thread. I am back in the cabin with the wind and the slow pulse of the refrigerator. The manuscript waits like a guest who refuses to leave. At dusk, electricity sags again. The lamp gives a little gasp. The manuscript flips one page on a breath or a draft or a joke at my expense. My heart learns to become a drum. I tell myself to go outside, breathe air that hasn't been inside lungs 100 times already. I step onto the porch. The boards are cold, the kind of cold you can hear. The lake holds the last of the day's light like an apology. I listen, because the story has trained me to listen, and I hear a third knock from under the dock. I step back inside. In the kitchen, I find a knife set I do not remember buying. 6 blades in a dark wooden block. The chef knife reflects a fractured room. The metal seems to hold something darker than the room can offer. A line from the manuscript leans into my ear. He hides the sharp thing in a softer object, foam, bread, a folded towel, so he doesn't look like he's come to do harm, even to himself. On instinct, I open the bread box. Nothing. I open the freezer. A folded towel rafts against a bag of peas. I unfold it. And there, neatly slid into the seam, is a smaller blade. Not the chef knife, the paring knife, thin as a remark. My calm becomes a performance I am learning in real time. I put the knife back, refold the towel, return it to its frozen raft. I do this with clinical movements, like a nurse in an empty ward. After dark, the manuscript changes color. The ink looks more purple. The white of the page takes on the texture of skin. Every so often I think I see a word that was not there before. Unlatched. Mirror. Repair. I begin talking to the cabin, because silence is a solvent, and I need something left of me by morning. At 2 a.m., another flashback cleaves me in half. It is not a picture, so much as a geometry. A triangle of light on a hallway floor, a breath that is not mine, the weight of a hand on the back of my neck with the patient pressure of someone training a dog. A voice, genderless and exact, says, "You wrote it so you wouldn't have to live it. You rehearsed." And then the blizzard in my head closes its white hand. I am shaking, not visibly, not theatrically. The shaking is internal, a tuning fork in the bones. I tell myself a story in the same calm voice you are hearing now. You are safe. This is a temporary condition. Your mind is doing this to protect you. But the manuscript is a scribe who enjoys his work. Near the end of part 2, I meet the twist. The narrator, my narrator, addresses the reader in a second person that feels like a finger on my sternum. You think you are reading your own words because the handwriting is yours. You think you are tracing your own traps because the room resembles the room you stand in now. But the thing about a mask is not that it hides the face. It teaches the face how to behave. You are not the author, you are the alibi. I read it twice, 3 times, each time the sentence lowering a degree, cooling like metal in winter air. I say, softly, if I am not the author, who is? The cabin chooses not to answer. On page 143, a marginal note in my hand, says, "When you find this, read aloud into any reflective surface. The truth needs an audience." I take the lamp to the mirror. The light paints my face in warm varnish, the rest of the room falling away. I hold the manuscript like a chapel book and read the marginalia aloud. My voice sounds like a stranger who learned to mimic me in order to pass as family. Nothing happens. Then the power fails entirely. The cabin inhales darkness. The mirror continues to reflect faint moonlight, hungrily. My face is now a suggestion. Behind my head, in the mirror, there is a second me, slightly out of alignment, like a misprinted stamp. He lifts his hand a hair after I do, a lag as thin as a shaved breath. I do not sleep. I sit with the dark until the dark forgets I am there. Morning returns with the insolence of routine. My coffee tastes of ashes and questions. The freezer hums. I take out the folded towel and find it empty. The paring knife is gone. My heartbeat gives a small, professional cough. There is a final note in the manuscript, above the title on the first page, written so faintly I missed it before. Tilted to the light, it reveals itself. Don't worry, you couldn't have written this. You're not that cruel. I say the words slowly, letting each settle on the tongue and dissolve. For the last time, I consider leaving. But if I leave without answers, where will I go? The world is a map with only one marked location. Here. I begin Act 3.
Night is a knife that knows your ribs. It slides in familiar, tries not to make a fuss. At 11, the wind decides the eaves are an instrument. The cabin answers with small, throat-clearing sounds. The lake is a lid screwed tight. I move through the rooms with a flashlight and a patience I did not know I possessed. The beam catches dust like small weather systems. In the living room, the cheap marina painting hangs slightly crooked. I straighten it. Behind it is a shallow recess cut into the drywall. Inside the recess, a cassette recorder the color of a used bandage. A dated, inelegant thing with 2 little glass eyes. Beside it, a single tape labeled in my hand, repairs. The recorder's batteries work as if they were expecting me. I press play with the same careful solemnity I use to close a dead man's eyes in fiction. My voice fills the room, but it is the voice I use in interviews, measured, empathetic, a baritone prescribed by doctors in a clinic for anxious men. If you are hearing this, the tape says, it means the story has done its work. I do not remember making the tape. My mouth opens in tandem with the recorded voice, as if the muscle memory of an old speech has awakened. You are not the author, the tape continues, patient as a school teacher. You are the instrument. You built this place in language first, then found it in the world. You wrote the instructions so they would seem alien when you found them, because alienation is the cleanest kind of absolution. The tape scratches. My living self swallows. The method is simple. The death is not yours. The guilt is. You made a man disappear by reducing him to a pronoun. He became an argument. You edited him out. The cabin is the theater where you perform the amnesia required to go on living. I turn the recorder off. The silence after the voice is almost holy. I take the lamp back to the mirror because the marginal note demanded an audience, and because I have become a faithful student of instructions. The mirror returns my face. Behind it, 3 inches to the left, the misprint me does something I don't. He smiles. A thin, unkind smile, mine and not mine. It is the smile I have seen on book jackets when I'm trying to look like a man who knows what his words are doing. I say, aloud, with the weightless authority of a calm narrator, who did I make disappear? The mirror me mouths, who do you think? I hear footsteps above me. There is no above. The cabin is a single story. The ceiling answers with a small lament. In the kitchen, the folded towel rests where I left it. The freezer exhales cold as if tired of its own patience. I open the back door. Unlatched, says the manuscript, the word now a pulse, and step onto the small stoop. The night takes my heat and gives me nothing back. A shape waits by the dock, a shade peeled from the dark. It is a man's height, but the boundaries are wrong, as if seen through warped glass. He holds something that flashes briefly, metal greeting moon. The dock remembers its knocking lessons. I speak calmly, the way you speak to someone you hope will not startle. If you are a memory, I am ready. If you are a man, put the knife down. No response, unless you count the sound the lake makes when it clenches. I step forward. The boards protest, quietly. The figure remains a figure until the flashlight finds it and reveals a coat folded over a sawhorse, a branch leaning at a human posture, and the paring knife pinched in the gap between wood and rope, tied there with twine like a terrible ornament. Behind me, in the dark mouth of the door, someone breathes. I pivot. No one stands there. The breathing is mine. For a time measured by the patience of moths, I hold still. The moths interpret my stillness as stone and settle on my shoulders, my jaw. The night puts its ear to my chest and listens for a confession. I retrieve the paring knife. It is not special. It is simply a small tool made to separate things that once belonged together. I carry it like a guilty idea, blade tucked in, and return to the living room. The recorder sits where I left it, reprimand and teacher. I press play again. You will be tempted, my voice says, to assign a villain to the story.
The man who vanished was complicated and often unkind. He will be described by others as both a tragedy and a wake-up call. You will try to braid those into a rope sturdy enough to pull you out. The tape clicks, resumes. But listen carefully. There is no he. There is only the part of you that needed to die for the rest to continue. You rehearsed it as fiction so the stain could be called art. I turn the tape off as if I can amputate it there. My calm voice, this voice, goes on because it is all I have of a religion I no longer believe in. I sit on the floor, spine against the sofa, paring knife placed on the coffee table like a communion wafer. And then, because the instructions have trained me, I perform the last one. I read the final page of A Method of Vanishing. It is only one line. The truth is not what happened. The truth is what you can live with. I wait for catharsis the way children wait for thunder after lightning. The delay lengthens, frays, disappears. I do not call the police. I do not call my agent, my doctor, or the ghost of my better self. I close the manuscript and slide it back into the drawer where I first found it. I straighten the crooked painting. I return the recorder to its recess and let the cheap marina keep its secret harbor. I pour water in a glass and drink like a man resuming a rehearsal. The water is cold enough to remind me I have teeth. When dawn finally arrives, color seeps into the room with the timidity of a first apology. The trees stretch, counting their fingers. The lake deglosses, becomes merely water. I step to the mirror to face whoever is back there. He is gone, or I am. I shave. I make coffee. I sit at the desk and open a fresh notebook. On the first page, I write in the same careful hand, repairs. It is not a confession, it is a schedule. The resolution is not happy, it is precise. In the weeks that follow, I will forget enough to make room for a version of myself who can leave the cabin and walk into a world made of ordinary lies. Sometimes at night, when the wind studies the eaves, I will hear the dock practicing its 2 knocks, and I will say into the darkness, in a calm voice that could lull a guilty man to sleep, "We did what we had to." And the darkness will nod because it understands the terms.